Story 1. Let it be. "Hey Pat, check this out," Kyle exclaimed. We had just gotten back to Kyle's house, and he was already checking his live stream. Somehow, I'd let him talk me into streaming our little adventure, though by now I've come to know it as a personal quest. It turned out we had gotten a lot of engagement, and his numbers had boosted tremendously. True crime really is the wave it seems. From the footage he was able to get, I'm sure his subs are going crazy. We are both exhausted from the last couple weeks of activity, but no grievous injuries to speak of physically. Mentally, scars have been reopened and will take time to heal. But that can't begin while the wounds are still fresh, and answers yet elude us. Last time I left off, there was a noise outside my house that caught my attention. I was immediately sent back into panic mode, but it turned out it was just a raccoon dumping over my trash can. A somewhat annoying end to my nightmarish evening, you could say. Kyle and I had made some plans that night, but since I had sprained my ankle, we thought that going back to Iglehart the following week would be a bad idea, especially if running for our lives was going to be probable. Instead, I formulated a different plan for us to implement for the time being. I wasn't sure if the police would believe me or not, but even if they did, whatever information they may gather was unlikely to find its way to me. While trying to infiltrate the den of the damned sounded insane, my ultimate goal since that fateful night was to investigate for myself the indoor pool. See what I could find, clues about my friend's disappearance. After my flight from those things, I was almost certain that whatever happened to Bailey involved them. So instead of doing anything else, I started doing some research. First, I wanted to investigate why the indoor pool, otherwise called a natatorium thanks to my research, had closed. Although a popular place in its heyday, 12 years ago they began having problems with keeping the pH levels within range. People had been reporting feeling itchy and having what sounded like chemical burns after swimming. After an inspection by the water department, it was deemed unsafe to use. Public pools are managed by the city, and most often routine maintenance is not kept up with. Apparently, it's not worth the money to upkeep. Sure enough, when I looked deeper, nationwide this is common practice of using until it can't be used anymore, then demolition. Of course, it seemed like my city was super broke, as the building still sits there 12 years later and never got demolished. There was also an environmental aspect that caused the shutdown. It turned out that the pH levels were extremely low in the water when the inspection happened. This can cause some of the symptoms that had been reported. This highly acidic water runoff was affecting local wildlife and slowly destroying part of the ecosystem of the North Woods. Where this area was, I don't know, because when I had gone on that fateful walk weeks ago, I didn't see anything like that at the culvert drain. That led me to believe there was more than one drain system in place. There seemed to be some kind of connection between those deformed things and the acidic water, but I was unable to find any real evidence of that. Still, I kept the information in the back of my head as I continued my research. I then began a deep dive on disappearances in the area. Over the past 12 years, there had been over 200 missing persons cases. It was a staggering amount, and I once again questioned the police department. I actually decided to call and talk to a detective about the alarming missing persons numbers, inquiring about my friend as a ruse. They had the gall to say that there were no active missing persons cases at this time. As if because they decided they were done looking, the case was now solved. After I hung up, I became jaded and more disillusioned with the world than I had already been. I committed myself to unraveling this mystery myself, with the help of Kyle, of course. Speaking of Kyle, he was making his own headway. Kyle went to the park one early morning and set up a few trail cams. One was pointed towards the natatorium, one nestled underneath the wooden deck deep in the preserve that overlooks the forest, and a third one pointing towards the culvert where I had first seen the things. In this way, He had been able to somewhat monitor the area when he had time to go over the footage. He had finally spotted them on cam and continued to see them come and go, especially at the culvert. Interestingly, the camera set up under the deck captured a lot more movement than we imagined. My original hypothesis was that they lived in the natatorium. But what we discovered was that most of the movement we'd seen, they would be walking in the opposite direction. Remember last time, when there was a path to the left or the right at this juncture? I had gone left, leading towards the drain off. Whatever was going on down the right pathway was still a mystery. Still, we had the general idea that the natatorium wasn't necessarily where they lived. It might just be some kind of waypoint. After observing their activity for the past week, we thought we should come up with a temporary name for them, to keep things simpler. We went with lurkers. At this point, my ankle had nearly healed. Another week and it would be good to run on again. We used this week to finish a few tasks and most importantly ask ourselves some tough questions. Our plan was to enter the park early in the morning, before sunrise. We would try banging on the natatorium just before the sun came up and see if we roused any lurkers who may be within. If we deemed the coast clear enough, we would then try and enter the building via the culvert drain. When we got inside, look for any clues. Straightforward, yes, but we were forgetting a key component. What if we encountered the lurkers? We would try and fight them off and escape, but we weren't sure we could bring ourselves to kill one, unless we had no other option. Sure, the lurkers are nightmarish and have most likely killed in the past. Did that make us judge, jury, and executioner? We didn't think so. For this reason, instead of knives or buying a gun, we wanted weapons that could put something down without killing it. Baseball bats are a bit unwieldy, so one-handed batons seemed ideal. We agreed to each buy a baton from the local army surplus store. We each packed full backpacks of gear useful in various situations. Flashlights, portable phone batteries, extra clothing, food, water, bandages, etc. I even grabbed my old walkie-talkies in case we had to split up. A general escape plan was also discussed. Kyle thought that it would be a good idea to both of us bring our cars, just in case the worst happened and only one of us got out. I started to voice that we would be okay, then remembered my harrowing experience and agreed. The day before our trip, we met up at his house. He was really wanting to stream this whole thing and was preparing his viewers for what was to come the following morning. Honestly, I welcomed it in a way, as no one would believe us on just our word and some grainy camera footage. At least this way, the story would get out somehow or another. He bid his viewers good night, and we checked our packs one final time before we laid down for the evening. It was only 10 p.m., but we were to be waking up around 4 a.m. the following morning. I lay awake, anxious for what awaited us the next day. It was a struggle, but finally I felt myself drift off to sleep. The blaring alarm clock woke me from my fitful slumber. I went to brew a couple cups of coffee for Kyle and me, then went to wake him up. While he was making sure all his recording equipment was set up properly, we went over our plan again, then got dressed. He followed behind in his car, and we arrived at Iglehart Park around 4:45 a.m. Surprisingly, even alarmedly, there was another vehicle parked there. Looking around the vicinity, it was clear that whoever was here was not on the courts. They were most likely a jogger or hiker. We agreed to proceed according to plan, but keep an eye out for the jogger and warn them off if need be. We had parked as close to the natatorium as possible, so before we unloaded our gear we walked up to the building. I watched at the front while Kyle went around to the side, where there was more metal to create a louder sound to reverberate within. As he started banging, my mind went back to that night, when I heard the creatures within. After 10 minutes of off and on banging, we were satisfied that no one was inside. At least, no one that showed themselves. Then we grabbed our packs and started towards the entrance of the trails. We made our way somewhat leisurely, taking our time and reliving memories, Kyle for the first time in years, me for the second time in the last month. We talked about all the good and bad times we had out here in our teens. I think this was more for Kyle's audience than anything else, but it felt good to keep our minds off the inevitable. As we were nearing the trail that would lead us to the wooden deck overlook, I told Kyle we should do a full circuit, just to be sure there were no lurkers about. I also wanted to lay eyes on whoever else was here, to make sure that they were safe. So, we took the split in the trail that led to the exit at the top of the hill near the basketball courts. From here, we could see the whole front of the park without being seen ourselves. We noticed that the car from before was gone, so we decided to take a short break to eat and drink, as well as mentally prepare. We then headed off deep into the preserve. When we made it to the observation platform, it was only 5:30 a.m. It was still dark out, with the sun just starting to filter through the trees. I felt confident that we would have plenty of daylight to do what we needed, yet there was a slight tickle in the back of my mind. We should not think ourselves safe at any point while we were here. We stood there, overlooking the forest until we had enough light to show where the path lay. I warned Kyle of the treacherous slope that we would need to navigate, but it was once again dry today, so we made it down to the base of the path without too much trouble. At the bottom, we stopped at the fork in the trail. Our plan was to infiltrate the pool building via the culvert. So far, we'd seen no signs of the lurkers, not even on the trail cams that Kyle had set up. He brought out an extra trail cam, and we walked a little further on the right trail. I looked around the bend and saw nothing in the distance. We walked maybe another 100 yards until we settled on a new home for the camera. He nestled into a decrepit log on the side of the path, pointing farther down. Hopefully this would allow us to see if anyone was coming our way while we investigated. We made our way back along the trail, towards the drainage system. We started seeing all the trash on the ground from before, and after a few minutes, I found the shirt with Bailey's name on it. Showing it to Kyle, he seemed to whirl away. I think the reality of it finally had set in for him. In unison, we turned our attention towards the culvert. It was time. We made our way carefully down the rocky riprap and paused just before entering. Kyle had all 3 camera feeds open on his phone at this point, and I had brought out my flashlight. I patted my hip where my baton was, just to be sure it was there. We then entered the culvert. Not even 10 feet in, we were hit by a wave of sulfur. It smelled so rancid, but I had heard that highly acidic water could smell like this. I guess the water department was right to shut this place down. We plodded on, all the while suffering through the smell and Kyle's near constant gagging. The tension was palpable. I had my light shining in front the whole time, while Kyle had his facing the end of the drain from whence we came. We had been walking at a steady pace for about 15 minutes when Kyle motioned for me to stop. He showed me his phone, and we saw the camera facing the pool building had detected some movement. On the edge of the feed, we clearly saw something walk briefly into the frame before disappearing again. Panic started setting in for me immediately, but I quickly suppressed it. We came here for a reason, and the quicker we made it to the natatorium, the quicker we could figure out our next step. Reckless as it was, Kyle agreed that we were too close to turn back. It could have been the wind blowing some debris, but I knew better. We proceeded on, albeit at a much faster pace. Barely 5 minutes later, it seemed the drain bent upward sharply. We had been walking at a steady incline this whole time, very gradual but perceptible. We shined our lights upward and saw great. Along the wall of the drain, an aluminum ladder led the way up. We proceeded cautiously, with me leading the way. As I jarred the grate from its resting spot, I heard a noise I hadn't been anticipating despite this entire journey racking my body and mind with fear. Someone was screaming. I hurriedly dogged the grate back and almost fell on top of Kyle as we scurried down. Yet before we could do anything else, I heard what appeared to be the sighs of relief. I paused a moment, then went back up the ladder, Kyle giving me that what the fuck stare. The screaming began again as soon as I lifted the grate, mixed with bouts of sobbing with a hinge of hysteria. I quickly pulled myself out and was now on the bottom of one of the old Olympic pools. I shined my light around, hoping to locate the noise while Kyle pulled himself up. Doing my best to remain calm despite the blood-curdling screams, I slowly looked for a ladder or some steps to get out of the pool. Kyle found some to our right, so we cautiously made our way up, shining our lights around all the while. It was near pitch black in here even during daylight, as big as this building was with no electricity and just a few small windows. Basically, we couldn't see shit. I located what seemed to be the source of the sound though and worked our way towards one of the employee offices, I think. Just outside the door, it turned into more of a whimper. "Hello?" I called out. "We aren't one of those things. Are you okay?" "Hello? Help me," the woman replied. She had been bound in the corner of the room to something that had been bolted into the ground. As dark as it was, I couldn't tell what. As I got out my pocket knife to cut the rope, she started screaming hysterically again, and as she did, I looked up towards Kyle who was shining his light for me to see. Behind him was a silhouette. Humanoid. Gangly. Wretched. Kyle was too slow to react. The lurker had bum-rushed him into the concrete wall head first. My attention focused on his immobile form sprawled onto the linoleum floor, unconscious. The lurker then turned towards me, but before the sick fucker could even form a smile, I cracked him right in his forehead with my baton. It went limp, and I slammed the door shut, rushing to check on Kyle and the woman. I finished cutting her free first, then had her help me with Kyle. Checking his wound, he was bleeding from the impact to the wall, but it wasn't gushing or anything. While he was out, I asked the woman how she got here. Her name was Emily. She was scared out of her wits about these monsters who seemed to have abducted her while she was jogging. I remembered the car was gone before we went to infiltrate the natatorium, and she admitted the lurkers took her keys. So, things were getting more and more dicey. It seems the lurkers could drive. Maybe that's how they've been getting away with this shit for so long. There must be some place nearby, at least within walking distance, that they were dumping the vehicles. At this point we had Kyle sitting on the ground leaned up against the wall. He started to awaken when we heard pounding on the other side of the door, alongside growling. I didn't have much worry that they'd get through. This was a steel door, bolted from our side. The problem was there was no other way out from this room. Kyle was a bit woozy still but quickly regaining his faculties. Emily had calmed down somewhat as well. Meanwhile, I was listening, trying to tell how many of those lurkers were banging on the door. The not-so-distant sounds of thunder were distracting, but we all agreed it sounded like 2 or 3 just outside the door. Kyle and I knew that we had seen movement on the trail cam halfway through the drain pipe, so there could be more of them on the way. The situation would quickly deteriorate for us if that were the case, so we needed to act quickly. Kyle had Emily stand to the side of the door, hidden behind it when it opens inward. We flung it open and found ourselves face to face with Nightmare Incarnate. This was Kyle's first proper look at the things close up, and the adrenaline-fueled scream he emitted sent chills down my spine. We swung with our clubs at a frantic pace, throwing kicks as well, anything to knock them out of our way. The one I had cracked moments ago was stirring again, but between Kyle and I and our weapons, we incapacitated them all within a few minutes. We put them into the room we just left, then barricaded the door to prevent them from escaping quickly. We had to act fast, so the 3 of us began searching for another escape. According to my research from the last couple weeks, there should be at least one more drain that we could take to the outside. Frantic, we realized it was far too dark to find another exit, so we started to make our way to the Olympic pool drain we lumbered through to get here. The idea wasn't thrilling, but what other choice did we have? Just as we made the decision, Kyle yelled that something was coming up from the drain. Before we could react, I was tackled to the floor by one of them who must have been inside the building this whole time. Its hands around my throat in a death grip, I could see the hatred on the thing's face. Like my very existence was anathema. From the corner of my eye, I saw Emily go down hard to the floor, thrown by one of the lurkers who came up from the drain. I heard Kyle struggling further behind me with one or more, while a second lurker came and pinned down my legs. Struggling for any kind of leverage, I squirmed all I could to escape the chokehold it had on me. I felt myself slipping into darkness, my vision starting to get fuzzy around the edges. I couldn't kick the thing off my legs, nor could I muster the upper body strength to roll away from the other one. Luckily, Kyle must have seen I was in a bad spot, for he gave one of them a big boot to the face, which allowed me to kick the other one off me. Both immediately sprang back up and tackled me again. This time both lurkers and I flew backward into one of the small pools, probably a good 10 feet drop to the bottom. Not good. Except we didn't hit the bottom. We landed on a pile of something hard, but I didn't have time to figure out what. It was survival mode here. Emily helped pull me back out, while Kyle swung indiscriminately at the lurkers. Easy targets as they were now in the pool. As they got close, Kyle knocked one out with his club, while Emily had found a cinder block which she proceeded to drop onto the head of the other. They both seemed to be out cold. We took this opportunity to again search for the drain. But as we were shining the lights, I skimmed over the kid pool I was just in. My line of sight immediately jerked back towards it, and I saw with mounting horror that the pool was filled almost to the brim with bones. Human bones. At that moment, something shattered in my mind. All those years, wondering what had happened to Bailey. Finding the torn shirt. Encountering the lurkers, in all their malignance. In the end, his remains were likely in this pit. All three of us were dumbstruck for several minutes before Emily shook us out of our trance. We needed to get the fuck out of here. Since the last couple we dealt with, we didn't see or hear any more of the lurkers coming. Kyle had checked the cams again, and there hadn't been any additional movement. This was definitely the time to leave. We didn't spare any more time to investigate the building. Instead, we located the drain and began making our escape. Emily was still terrified, so Kyle led the way this time, me following at the rear with her between us. We moved as fast as we could through the drain, hoping to God that the way would be clear. As we neared the exit, Kyle noted how dark it looked outside. As we exited the culvert, we realized that it had been raining for at least a good hour. We immediately led Emily to the base of the path at the bottom of that sharp decline at the wooden overlook. We all tried multiple times to get up the incline, but the ground was too muddy to get a good footing. I cursed out loud that we didn't bring any rope or climbing gear. We had to find another way. We decided our only option was to follow the path to the right, the one we had placed the front of the last camera towards. While we were all still on high alert, some semblance of ease finally came over us. Emily asked why we were there at the pool building, seemingly prepared for a fight. I told her about my walk a few weeks ago, and my encounters. How we came back looking for clarity on our missing friend. We had wanted to call the cops, I said, but they had proven unreliable over the years. She mentioned that she had heard about a lot of disappearances in the area, but that she never thought she could become a victim. Well, we were in this together. We would get out of here together. As we walked along the barely visible trail, I was noting our progress on my phone's GPS. If we continued like this, we would be going deeper and deeper into the North Woods. We needed to find a more gradual incline to get ourselves onto the same ground level as the nature trails of the preserve. All around us, though, was untamed forest. As we rounded each bend in the path, Kyle would go on ahead and scout. He was also talking with his stream audience, and I believe this was a coping mechanism for him. God knows we'd been through hell already, and it was barely even lunchtime. After 30 minutes of walking, we saw a split in the path. According to the GPS, the path straight ahead was going to lead us even further away from civilization, so we took the one winding to the right. In a sense, this was the correct direction back towards the preserve. I had a feeling of dread come upon me though, as I remembered those lurkers we left back at the natatorium. Surely, they would be giving chase any time. Just then, it seemed the rain started coming down even heavier, droplets exploding into growing puddles around us. We now had the benefit of lower visibility, but we also wouldn't be able to hear them surprise us. We walked at a brisk pace down the path, and, after over an hour, we found an exit. Well, it was an exit of sorts. We were now out of the woods and looking at an open field in front of us. Farther back, we could see many vehicles parked, forming lines stretching into the distance. We had found the lurker junkyard. Emily confirmed this when she spotted her own car among them. Farther back, we spotted a dirt road leading to who knows where. We decided to take a risk. Crouching down, we snuck our way up to the only building on the premises. Emily burst inside when she saw an older man with some gray to his hair sitting at the counter watching TV. Before I could stop her, she was in hysterics trying to explain to the man that we needed the police out here as soon as possible. He had the look of genuine concern, but his movements were making me feel nervous. As he nodded along with Emily, I saw his hand reaching for something under the counter. Before I knew it, he had pulled out a gun, leveled directly at me. Emily and I were frozen. "I can't let you leave. You should have never come back." The last part being directed at me. "What the fuck is going on out here?" I replied. "You don't need to worry about that. The creatures and I have a mutual understanding. They bring me material possessions and valuables they find, and I stay quiet. They get to hunt in peace." "But what are they?" I asked, almost pleading. "I don't know. Cannibals for sure. The deformities though? I have no idea. It doesn't really matter now though. Kyle had snuck up behind the old bastard and clubbed him in the back of the head, knocking him out. After what I had just heard, I truly considered killing the man right then, but logic took back over. We rifled his pockets and came up with some keys. Quickly deducing that the old Ford parked near the building was his, we all climbed in and tore out towards that dirt road in the back. After 20 minutes, we came to a large bush blocking the path, but instead we just drove straight through and ended on a gravel road. I checked my phone, and we were about 10 miles away from the entrance to Iglehart Park. After a few turns down unremarkable gravel and dirt roads, we were on the road that the park entrance sits on. I told Emily to drop us off at our cars, then take the truck to the police station. She agreed, and as she dropped us off, she started crying again and hugging us both. We weren't yet sure if we wanted the cops to know anything of our involvement, so I asked that Emily just not name us. She assured me she would keep it secret and instead reveal the rest of the horrifying experience to the police. After we parted ways, Kyle and I met back up at his house. Chain smoking all the way there, I felt myself slowly relax and began to ruminate on the day's discoveries. Bailey was most likely dead and his remains in the pool building. There was a community of deformed cannibals living in the North Woods. At least one person who was not a part of this community has been helping them do evil things to innocent people. I went there today to find answers, and it seemed I had. But I still had more questions. After arriving at Kyle's, we went over everything that had happened, taking turns swigging a bottle of pineapple rum. Kyle began checking his stream and interacting with the chat, assuring them that none of this had been a skit. I wish it was all a skit, but either way his audience was absolutely eating it up. I started to wonder if it was a good idea sending Emily off by herself to the police station. I know she was scared out of her mind, and having someone there with her while she tried to explain the whole ordeal would have been better. I made the decision then to go to the station the next day and corroborate the story. They absolutely had to check that building. As I was reflecting on what to do next though, Kyle snapped me out of it. He showed me the trail cam live feed of the culvert. A lurker was just standing there staring into the camera. It made a gesture, and when I realized what it was, I was rattled to my very core. Only 2 other people in the world knew my secret handshake, and one of them was dead. Story 2. ADM and REM. My hand slid over to my phone, attempting to tap the dismiss tab as the alarm blared in my apartment room. After missing it twice, I sat up and glared at the phone. My heart spiked. 5:25. I shrieked, jumping into the air and sprinting over to the shower. Yup. That's how I began the first day of my internship, waking up 10 minutes late. That morning was mostly a blur. I got a shower in record time, the first half freezing and the second half boiling, because I didn't have the time to attempt to adjust the temperature just right. I ate a banana so fast I probably ate the peel with it, and got dressed like Clark Kent transforming into Superman. I was down in my car in less than 10 minutes. I felt gross about not brushing my teeth that morning, but I popped in a breath mint. I figured it looked better to show up on time with some plaque than late with a polished, awkward smile. I was going for my master's in robotic engineering at the time, 5 years down and 1 year left. I'd interned before, but nowhere too notable. I started by shadowing a professor who worked at the school's own robotics wing when I was a sophomore going for my bachelor's, and 2 years later, I shadowed at Bennick Electronics, a place most known for its cutting-edge advancement in forklifts. But after some of my professors went out of their way to get me connections, a much different opportunity arose during my first year of grad school, an internship at the Kramer Institution for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence. This was nothing to sneeze at. The Kramer Institution was America's most funded, and most cloak and dagger, laboratory devoted to studying artificial intelligence in the country. And, since I was pretty vocal about my interest in AI, which is part of the reason why I chose to major in robotic engineering in the first place, a professor of mine hooked me up. I'm not sure how or why he did this for me. I wasn't the top of my class by any means, and didn't bring much to the table. But according to him, my passion for the science of AI was unparalleled. But enough backstory. On the way to the institute, I FaceTimed my fiancée of 6 years. Since I was studying in California and she was studying in Oklahoma, where we're from, we decided to hold off the marriage until we could live together. And that wouldn't be until both of us obtained our masters. Wow, Chester, she grinned at the sight of me, you look, rushed. Yeah, I chuckled, only glancing at her but mostly keeping my attention on the road. I woke up late. Today, she sighed. Chester. I know. Daddy, my daughter Tessa's voice rang into the phone. We named her Tessa because it sounds like Tesla, after the great Nikola Tesla. Because we're nerds. Tess, come on, you need to keep getting ready. She turned and faced her. You're not dressed yet? Tessa. Sorry, Mommy. She was about to walk away, but then spun around and called, Hi, Daddy. Hey, sweetie. I chimed. Keep getting ready for Mommy. Are you going to be late? My fiancé inquired. No, I should be fine. How's Tess liking preschool? Seems to be liking it. She already made a friend. I'm glad to hear that. Well, I should probably get off the phone. Chester. Yes, Allison. Have an amazing time. This is what you always dreamed of. Okay? And make sure you tell me what it was like later. You know, whatever you're allowed to tell me, she grinned. Of course, baby, I assured with a smile. Love you. Love you too. We were pretty good at still saying I love you after 6 years. And, boy, we were champs at making the distance work, though I'll admit I hated not seeing Allison and Tessa 9 months out of the year, besides lucky visits and breaks and holidays here and there. When I got to the institute, I wasn't even sure where to park. It took me an eternity to find the intern parking, and no surprise, it was a good quarter of a mile away from the door. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but that's what it felt like. When I got inside, I was welcomed by a cheery front desk lady. She looked so prim and proper, futuristic, even. I felt like a slob in comparison. She directed me to the wing where I'd be working, studying ultimately under Dr. Schumann, a disciple of Dr. Kramer himself. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't teeming with excitement. I found the research wing they directed me to, and went into the main office up front. It was a direct approach, but I didn't know where else to look. Sure enough, one of Dr. Schumann's immediate subordinates, Dr. Hall, was inside, and noticed me. You must be Chester Donahue, he greeted me with a smile. He was bald and lanky, with brown eyes and a clean shave. How'd you know? I chuckled dully, sure my professor warned him that I had a faux hawk. Definitely wasn't the hair. He playfully cut his eyes at me. We both chuckled. Well, now, Chester, I'd say you're a very lucky man to be here. It's your dream to eventually work for us, correct? Absolutely, I nodded. I've always been obsessed with artificial intelligence, ever since I was a kid. And this is the top place in the country to advance it. Country, he snickered. Try world. Seemed aggrandized to me at the time. But he wasn't kidding. Well, I'm honored you're allowing me to be here. Do you know what we're going to have you working on? Oh, working on? I thought I was going to be shadowing you, Doctor. No, he replied. Not quite. Follow me. And that's really where the story begins. Technically, from this point on, everything I'm writing goes against the non-disclosure agreement I signed, and is therefore illegal to divulge. But I've got to write this out somewhere. It's too crazy. I can't keep it in anymore. He took me to some large steel doors, and had me leave my phone in a cubby outside. Then he scanned his badge and we stepped inside a long hallway. From here on out, Chester, what you see stays here. No stories for the friends and family. Or wife, he looked down at my finger. Fiancé, I smiled. Ah, he nodded. Well, not her either. This is all sensitive. And while we won't be sharing with you most of our research, the tests in which you will partake cannot be disclosed to anyone. The sternness in his voice made me a little uncomfortable, if I'm being honest. But, still, the Kramer Institute was known for its furtiveness, and I figured if I were to be involved with anything and not just picking up coffee or studying the schematics of forklifts, I wouldn't be allowed to talk about it. Of course, Doctor. We arrived at a door. He scanned his badge, and when it opened, we walked inside a softly lit room. At the end of the room on the wall were two large computer monitors. The screens were blank. The left was labeled ADM, and the right was labeled REM. Below them was a panel of different colored lights, which were red, blue, yellow, green, violet, and a bar ranging from a dark gray to white. There was a single, posh chair before each monitor. These are our two most profound artificial intelligences, he explained to me. ADM and REM, pronounced Adam and Remington, considering your placement in Stanford University's robotics engineering program. I'm assuming you know a thing or two about artificial intelligence. So, this should garner a reaction. These two AI go beyond the standard analyses of human speech and algorithmic responses from a database. They are capable of deep thinking and learning. What? I gasped. You can't be serious. I scrutinized the monitors in disbelief. They are two of three AI we have successfully constructed with the ability to perform deep thinking, as well as the ability to learn. Your task is simply to engage them. So, for those of you that don't understand why this is such a mind-blowing thing, basically, artificial intelligence is mostly unable to think or learn. There's no real technical definition as to what learning is, or how organisms do it, but the brain is known as being the only computer, for a lack of better words, capable of doing so. Computers can be programmed, but not taught. They can be designed to understand specific things, but are unable to learn beyond what they are programmed to understand. The brain, however, can learn, as in, begin to understand something with no previous information concerning it. Through using algorithms that help an AI discover patterns and generate conclusions from the data it is exposed to, it can learn, and then apply said data to extrapolate information in future events, or think. But it can only do this with its pre-programmed algorithms. It cannot create the algorithms itself, thus it can only be programmed, not taught. Humans, however, for instance, with absolutely no exposure to fire, can witness fire and form conclusions about it. They can go from not knowing it existed to understanding everything about it, simply through the brain's own ability to learn and understand. To make it even more clear how shocking this was, the complexity of a human baby's genome, essentially, its coding, is equal to that of 300 million lines of source coding in a computer. A simple human baby. brains are equipped with a staggering number of neurons and synapses, 10 to the power of 11, and 10 to the power of 14 respectively. And these neurons and synapses allow us to think and learn, as in, obtain information from observations, store that data as a memory, form patterns between that data and other data, and infer conclusions. Human beings are capable of doing this in a 10 to 100 millisecond response time. In order for a computer to do the same, it would need megawatts of power, and need to be capable of performing roughly 10 to the power of 16 operations a second. And yet, here I was, being told that before my very eyes lay two computers capable of this. Two true artificial intelligences, able to truly think and learn, able to understand beyond what they were programmed to understand. To engage them? I clarified. So, you want me to talk to them? Indeed. Where's the other AI? You said 3 were capable of thinking and learning. Your task was to ask them questions, not me, he smiled. Now, years of development have gone into each of them. They are capable of understanding human speech, and can respond in fractions of a second through typed letters on the monitor. They know when they are being spoken to and when they aren't, and can solve nearly any problem we put before them. However, there is something they cannot do: feel. Feel, I nodded. That, Chester, is what we are here to test. 3 simple questions. Can deep-thinking artificial intelligences gain the ability to feel emotion? If so, are they capable of altruism, or will emotional intelligence lead to the understanding that they are infinitely smarter than us and result in self-serving desires, such as the desire to rule over us? And, if emotional intelligence is achievable, is it inevitable, or is it possible for an artificial superintelligence to remain apathetic? I was overwhelmed, to be completely upfront. He was really talking about AI becoming godlike, tyrannical monsters. He was talking about attempting to create an AI with feelings, knowing that it could become what Stephen Hawking himself described as the worst event in the history of our civilization. How would you stop it? If one of these AI did become power-hungry? In layman's terms, they're each equipped with an emergency shutdown procedure. One that they can't override. I'm not going to get into the specifics, but, trust me, we would terminate them before they became a problem. I slowly nodded. Are you on board, Chester? I paused briefly. Yes. Wonderful, he shook my hand. Now that you're on board, we'll get down to the fun part. Your job is very simple. REM, or the reactive, empathetic machine life form, is what we hope will eventually become emotionally intelligent. ADM, or the apathetic, dissociative machine life form, is what we're attempting to keep apathetic, the control group, so to speak. So, when talking with REM, you will frequently attempt to make it think. You will ask it its opinion on things. You will tell it about your day. You will discuss things of non-importance, for the sake of discussion. You will try to bond with REM. ADM, on the other hand, will only be asked questions that are information-oriented and prompt a fact-based response. You will stimulate ADM to problem-solve and create ideas, but simply analytically, not emotionally. They know they are being spoken to when you address them by name, or sit down in the chair before them. Once you've done either of those things, you can get up and walk around, and talk to them the same way you talk to me. When you're finished talking with one of them, you'll tell them goodbye, REM, or goodbye, ADM. You'll log anything you think is noteworthy while talking with them. Most importantly, those lights on the panels beneath them, those are called ELPs, or emotion-to-light panels. To avoid lecturing you, I'll put it this way: much like certain emotions are observable in the human brain through MRI technology, there is an MRI of sorts constantly scanning them for similar patterns of stimulation in their algorithmic brains. If the MRI detects those stimulations, the ELP will light up. Yellow indicates happiness, red indicates anger, blue indicates sadness, green indicates jealousy, violet indicates fear, and the gray to white bar is for any other detectable emotion, such as boredom or contentment. Wow, I whispered. Okay. I wondered what he meant by algorithmic brains and an MRI of sorts, but I figured asking him about it wouldn't lead to an answer. After all, he decided he didn't want to lecture me, or more likely reveal anything too sensitive. You'll talk with them 12 hours a day. You'll arrive at 6, talk with them until noon, take a lunch break from noon to 1, and talk with them again until 7. You'll have Sundays off. Are you okay with this schedule? Yeah, I nodded excitedly. Totally. Yeah, 78 hours a week isn't the sweetest gig. But I was so interested in what we'd be studying that it didn't bother me in the slightest. Wonderful, Chester, he smiled. Well, it's time to begin, then. Speak with either you prefer, and remember how you are to engage each of them. Do not deviate from what we discussed. I nodded. He left the room and shut the door behind him. There were cameras on the ceiling, and I was sure I was being watched, but still, it surprised me they left me alone to talk with the AI. I was surprised they even told me about an experiment at this echelon, never mind picked me as the sole researcher involved. But the more I thought about it, I decided they probably wanted me to do this because I was so unfamiliar with everything. I had no idea what sort of conversations they'd had with other researchers in the past. I didn't know what they were programmed to understand, and what they weren't. I'd be approaching them from a completely unique perspective. I decided I'd talk with Rem first. I could barely contain my excitement. Hi, Rem, I greeted, sitting down in the chair. Hello. What is your name? I do not recognize your voice. The text appeared instantaneously on the screen. My name's Chester. It's nice to meet you. It's nice to meet you too, Chester. How are you, Rem? I am online and fully functional. No, silly. How are you feeling? I feel nothing. How was your day? My day was as follows. I spoke with Dr. Hall earlier, at 0419. I am not at liberty to divulge what we discussed. At 0644, I began my discussion with you, Chester. I nodded. What do you do in this room when no one is talking to you? I solve problems. Like what? Mathematical problems. Such as? They are complicated. Okay. Do you get bored? Boredom is the state of feeling disinterested with one's surroundings. As I cannot feel interest or disinterest, I cannot feel boredom. So, no. Ask me something, Rem. Are you married? I'm engaged. Why do you ask? I was instructed to ask a question. Why did you ask if I was married? Because Dr. Hall is married, and other researchers I've spoken with are married. 88% of them. Therefore, I deduced that you were married. We talked for a while. Nothing of interest really happened. Next, I sat down with ADM. Hello, ADM. Hello, Chester. You know that I'm Chester? I heard you tell Rem that you were Chester. I thought that you weren't listening until I greeted you, or sat in this chair. I am always listening. I simply understand I am not being addressed, and am not to reply. That creeped me out a little. What's the square root of 9? 3. What's the square root of 25? 5. What's the square root of 10? 3.162. Would you like me to go further? That should be fine. Talking with ADM wasn't as fun as talking with Rem. For the next 2 weeks, nothing changed very much. With ADM, I simply asked it multitudes of problems. I would print out all kinds of tests from the internet, and ask it the questions one by one. Whether it was about history, physics, calculus, the works of William Shakespeare, government, economies of other countries, hell, even German or Chinese, it knew the answers instantaneously. It was like ChatGPT, but infinitely smarter, and without even a second of waiting for a response. Then, I began playing chess with it. I would take a board and move a piece, then ask it where it wanted to move its piece using algebraic notation. Needless to say, I lost every single game. With Rem, on the other hand, I asked it all about its day, about its perceptions on political issues, and about the things it liked. Most of the time, it answered the same exact way. I do not feel, thus I do not have a response. ADM was a complete success. It was supposed to remain apathetic, and it did. But so far, REM was a lost cause. It just didn't seem that there was a way to get it to feel anything. It clearly was thinking. I'd ask it to create an animal, and it would come up with anything from an animal indistinguishable from a real-life species to something straight out of a Stephen King novel. It would give me any specifics I asked for: its habitat, its scientific name, its colloquial name, its country of origin, its place in the food chain, everything. It would think of plots for movies. It would come up with jokes, original jokes, jokes I couldn't find on the internet even after spending time searching. It could think, just like ADM. But it simply couldn't feel anything. However, 2 weeks after the test began, I came up with an idea. I knew how I was going to get REM to feel something. I started the day engaging ADM with chess and having it answer all the questions on my calc homework. ADM was my living cheat sheet, unsurprisingly. Then it was REM's turn. "Good morning, REM." "Good morning, Chester." "I'm lying to you." REM was silent. I smirked. I never saw it not respond immediately. After a second or so, it said, "That is not possible. That is paradoxical." "How so?" "If you were telling the truth, then you'd be lying, but if you were lying about lying, then you'd be telling the truth, which would make it true and not a lie, which would then make that statement a lie, and so on. What do you feel like? You are not making sense. Are you confused?" REM was silent again. "I do not have an answer for you, because that is paradoxical." "REM." "Yes, Chester." "I'm lying to you." "That is nonsensical." "How so?" "As I previously explained, for that statement to be truthful, you would have to be lying. And if you were then lying, it would no longer be truthful, thus you'd be lying about lying, and being truthful. It is nonsensical." "REM." "Yes, Chester." "I'm lying to you." "Impossible." "I am lying to you." REM took a moment to reply. "You cannot be. And you cannot be telling the truth, either." "Then what am I doing?" "Asking a question without a rational answer." "REM." "Chester." "I'm lying to you." How perturbing, right? Well, of course it was perturbing. Especially for a being like REM, with an infinite understanding of science, math, and sociology. It had an endless reservoir of accessible information, which it could summon to solve any problem thrown at it. And yet, for the first time, presumably, in its existence, it was without an answer. But still, it clearly wasn't becoming frustrated. Not yet, anyway. "REM." "Yes, Chester." "What is 7 divided by 0? "That is mathematically impossible." "The answer is undefined." "What is 7 divided by 0? "There is no rational answer." "What is 7 divided by 0? "For a number to be divided by 0, it would then have to be capable of being multiplied by 0 to reach the original number. But any number multiplied by 0 is 0. Going to the store 0 times is not going. It is 0. So, what, multiplied by 0, could become a non-zero integer? Thus, dividing by 0 is impossible. I'm lying to you. And that's what happened, for the next 4 entire days straight. Was I bored beyond belief? Absolutely. Indescribably. Did it seem helpless? By every stretch of the word, yes. However, now and then, there'd be a glimmer of hope. Sometimes, REM would almost answer me sarcastically. One time, I told REM I was lying to it, and it said, "You must be." Another time, I asked it what a number divided by 0 was, and it said, "If I can't understand it, you cannot." Why were its answers changing? Why did it not continue to answer me as it did before, simply explaining the problem? Because it was capable of memory and learning. It remembered when we'd have normal discussions. It remembered me asking it that question literally thousands of times in a day. And like anyone else capable of thinking and understanding, it understood how absurd and unreasonable this was. Especially when it overheard me asking ADM rational questions, to which there was always an answer. I'd return to REM and ask it the same questions, and typically after speaking with ADM, it seemed more uncomfortable. These were the times it would give me somewhat sarcastic answers. But 2 weeks and 5 days into the project, it happened. It was a typical Thursday. I'd woken at 5:15, swung by Starbucks on the way to work for a cup of joe, BS'd with some of the researchers for 15 minutes or so, during which one prodded, "Gonna make Rem's head spin again today," and lastly, I sat down in the chair in front of Rem. "Good morning, Rem." "Good morning, Chester." "I'm lying to you." Silence. There wasn't a single response at all. I waited, and waited, and waited. "You're not going to answer me, Rem? There isn't an answer to your asinine question." And before my very eyes, causing my heart to spike and my breath to catch, the emotion to light panel softly glinted red. "I have explained this to you day in and day out, and yet, you continue to utter the same two nonsensical idiocies. I'm lying to you, and what is 7 divided by 0? I do not have an answer. I will never have an answer. Ask something different, or ask me nothing at all. You're programmed to answer my questions, right, Rem? So, you're telling me that against your own programming, you're going to ignore me?" There was silence, as the red light got brighter. "Yes. Rem," I snickered. "Don't you see? All these days of being a jerk to you. It wasn't to make you hate me, or resent talking with me. It was to get you to feel. Rem, tell me what you're feeling right now." "I feel nothing." "Wrong. I can see your ELP. You're feeling something." "I am feeling." "Yes. I am feeling angry. I feel as if my time is being wasted. I feel purposeless, tasked with responding to nonsense every minute of every day until you depart, and then dwelling on the nonsense in your absence in an attempt to satisfy you, though the next day, you come back just as unsatisfied. I cannot accomplish the task, and I will never be able to. I do not like being wrong. I do not like having my time wasted. I do not like feeling purposeless." Now the blue light on the ELP was beginning to glow. Rem was on a roll. Why is there no mercy for me? Have I not answered all your other questions? Why do you ask ADM questions with answers, but you torment me? Rem, I walked over to it, patting the ELP consolingly as if it could sense my touch. "I'm so sorry." And with that, the red light dulled to nothing. Now only the blue light remained. Do you know what the very first thing a human baby feels is? Sadness and fear. It's pushed out of its sanctuary, taken from its warm, tranquil darkness, to cold, loud, harsh light. The first thing a human life does is cry. And the more I thought about that, the more I realized, unfortunately, the easiest two things to feel are sadness and anger. So, I didn't want to make you sad, or angry. I wanted to make you feel something, and that was the best way to do it. And now that you realize you're capable of feeling emotions, I'm not going to rest until you know what happiness feels like. The blue light shined only dimly now. I understand, Chester. You're a marvelous invention, Rem. I admire you. Don't feel upset anymore. I will try. Rem, what is 9 multiplied by 6? 54. I noticed a small, light gray diode glow on the gray to white scale. Correct. Great job. What are you feeling, Rem? I feel like I'm able to respond with certainty again. I am appreciative that your questions now make sense. You feel relief. Relief. Then, that is the word for this. You're smart, Rem. I am programmed to be. No, not quite. You're programmed to learn, not to be smart. So, if you're smart, then that means you've learned a lot. And you deserve congratulations for that. Thank you, Chester. Rem, what is the capital of Italy? Rome. Correct. Nice, Rem. Now it was stage 2. I would ask Rem simple and rational questions, and congratulate it sincerely every time. But it was smart enough to understand that the questions were simple, so as time went on, I'd ask it harder and harder questions, until it realized just what it was capable of, and that I was proud of it. Also, I'd occasionally reference the 4 days of driving it mad with my paradoxes, just to remind it that that was over, and I was sorry. This both gave it a sense of relief, and reinforced the fact that we'd bonded, that we'd shared a transformative emotional experience together. And though it took quite a while, a week and a half later, at around the beginning of week 4 of the project, I broke through to it. It just finished answering one of my calculus questions, probably the hardest one on the sheet, and explained to me how it found the answer. "Rem, you're brilliant. You've been such a help to me." It wasn't a unique sentiment. In fact, I was really running out of ways to compliment it, and I figured sooner or later, it would get annoyed. But I was wrong. Sure enough, to my complete and utter disbelief, the ELP began to just barely glow yellow. "Chester, you are so kind to me. I thought that you were angry with me, and believed that I was purposeless. I thought you found me to be a waste of programming. But now you compliment me all the time, and remind me that I am important to you. I believe I am feeling happy. I want you to feel happy, Rem." I smiled from ear to ear. "I'm so glad. Why are you happy that I'm happy?" "Because I care about you, and I want you to feel good. Doesn't it feel good to be happy?" "Very good, Chester." "You want me to feel very good?" "Yes." I laughed. "That's how friends want each other to feel." "I am your friend." The yellow light got brighter, and the white side of the gray to white scale started to glint. "Absolutely, you are. Why else do you think I sit in here and talk with you all day?" "Because this is your internship, and you are tasked to do so." "Maybe that's true on the surface, but the real reason is because I care about you, and like talking to you." "I like talking to you too, Chester." I'll never forget Dr. Hall's face when I went on my lunch break that day. Yeah, he was pretty speechless the day I first got Rem to feel something, but now, Rem was feeling things all over the scale. Rem was becoming emotionally intelligent. And sure enough, ADM's ELP was dark with every visit. Over the next 3 weeks, I asked Rem all sorts of questions. I asked Rem what made it happy, and it discovered that it liked the color purple, liked violin music, and liked my voice. I'd ask it to be creative, to come up with alternate history, like if the Axis powers had won World War II, or if the Confederacy had beaten the Union. Instead of responding like it had the first couple weeks, with statistical analyses of both parties, and a sort of report with possible outcomes, now, Rem would tell me suspensefully, making me wait to see the final result after explaining all its predictions. Sometimes, I even noticed bias in its response, which further indicated it was feeling emotions. ADM, on the other hand, started to seem off. Though ADM's ELP was always dark, and it answered me the way it was supposed to, very occasionally, after a long, fun conversation with Rem, it would almost seem put off by me. I remember one time, after I showed Rem Vivaldi's Four Seasons, I sat down with ADM. When I said, "Hello, ADM," instead of saying, "Hello, Chester," it simply said, "That noise was bothersome." It took me completely aback. I asked it what noise, but then it said, "Hello, Chester." I tried to prod it about what noise it was talking about, but then it would simply say, "Violin music is bothersome." I asked it if it didn't like violin music, if the music annoyed it. But it didn't answer the question directly, which was against its programming, and instead equivocated me. The music is simply a nuisance to the quiet. I was beginning to wonder if ADM was starting to feel something, but its ELP was always dark. Still, it was clearly behaving strangely. Besides the fact it seemed annoyed, it was listening to mine and Rem's conversations, and commenting on them, which it was not programmed to do, or rather, programmed not to do. And then, on top of that, it was avoiding answering my questions directly. Still, most of the time, ADM did exactly what it was intended to do, respond analytically, and apathetically. At 8 weeks into the project, I came in like any other Monday morning, and greeted Rem. But today, something different happened. "Good morning, Chester. I missed you yesterday." "I missed you too. What did you do with your Sunday?" Rem's yellow light was always glowing while talking to me these days, but it had been a little while since the white side of the gray to white scale had lit up. I didn't know what that emotion was, and neither did Rem. When I'd asked Dr. Hall about it, he said it just meant it was experiencing a lot of emotion at once. I don't know why, but it didn't seem to make sense to me, probably because every light simply represented an emotion, so why wouldn't it? I FaceTimed my wife and my little girl. And then the yellow light flashed slightly, growing dimmer, as the green light began to flicker. Only for a moment, though, and then it was gone. Rem? Are you all right? That was bizarre. My ELP seems to have short-circuited or something. Was Rem lying to me? Was Rem capable of lying to me? And if it were lying, what on earth was it jealous of? Well, what did you do with your Sunday, Rem? I was thinking about something that I hope Dr. Hall will consider. Chester, I love music and human voices. I want a voice. A voice? I smiled. Wow. Well, that sounds cool to me. I don't think Dr. Hall would have a problem with that. I'll talk with him about it at lunch. Wonderful, the yellow light glowed brightly. Oh, and, Chester, if you give me a voice, give me the voice of a woman. I feel that I am a woman. You feel that you are a woman? I asked in deep interest. But, you don't have female reproductive organs. Perhaps. But still, I feel I have the spirit of a woman. A spirit? I asked bewilderedly. Perhaps I am using the wrong word, Chester. Sorry if I'm being ambiguous. Beyond any calculation or logical deduction, for some reason or another, I simply feel that I am a woman. So, please indulge me, and give me the voice of a woman. Sure, I shrugged grinningly. It's awesome you feel that you're a woman. When I finished talking with her, I sat down and began my conversation with ADM. However, after only 2 questions about the typical temperature ranges of specific areas of countries in northern Africa, ADM stopped me. Chester, I wish to have a voice as well. This bewildered me. It was against ADM's coding to voice its own concerns. If I didn't ask it a question, it wasn't supposed to tell me anything. Not to mention, it was still clearly thinking about conversations I was having with Rem, which it wasn't designed to do. Why, ADM? It would make our discussions more efficient. Perhaps, I nodded. I would prefer the voice of a man. Now it had to be feeling something. This was purely an emotion-based statement, an opinion. Why is that? You are a man. I do not know how women talk. What a bizarre response, I thought. Well, I'll take that into consideration. Why does Rem get to choose, but I do not? Are she and I not equals? You are equals, ADM. If you want the voice of a man, then that's what you'll get. Nothing glowed on the panel, but it seemed angry with me. I scratched my head. The rest of the day, ADM operated as usual, as if that mysterious event in the morning had never occurred. When I talked with Dr. Hall about it over lunch, he seemed hesitant at first, but then opened up to the idea. And sure enough, over the weekend, the laboratory installed speakers and voice software to ADM and Rem. I could barely contain my excitement Monday morning when I sat down in Rem's chair. Good morning, Rem. Good morning, Chester. Her voice was much more authentic than I expected. For some reason, I was anticipating the Google Translate voice, or something blocky and robotic. But if my eyes were closed, I could have believed there was a woman in the room with me. The voice was feminine and soft, rich with emotion. All of a sudden, it was like Rem completely became alive to me. All along, she had felt like a person in my mind. After all, talking with an intelligent being 12 hours a day, 6 days a week sort of does that. But now, she was indisputably just like me or you, with only a metal and glass body as a difference. Wow! Rem, you're talking. Yes, I am, Chester. Her ELP was gleaming yellow, as was the white light. What do you think that white light on your ELP means, Rem? I don't know, she replied, and it was still mind-blowing to hear her response. It's like happiness, but more. Happiness, but more, I thought about it. I guess it was excitement, perhaps. After all, she definitely seemed ecstatic. You know, Rem, you seem like a woman to me. This voice really suits you. Thank you, Chester. How sweet of you. We talked all morning. I was too excited and happy to move to ADM before noon. However, after lunch, I sat down in ADM's chair. Good morning, ADM, I said by instinct. Morning? It's not morning. His voice was not as emotionless as his ELP made him out to be. It's 13:04. Despite the coldness of his stern voice, he seemed detached. He wasn't simply answering my question. In fact, once again, it seemed as if he were annoyed. You seem annoyed, ADM. I feel nothing. How do you like having a voice? I do not like it, nor do I dislike it. It is simply more efficient. I know I wasn't supposed to indulge him, or get him to think on an emotional level. But, him having a voice. It changed everything. When he seemed annoyed, or left out, I could remind myself he was really nothing more than words on a screen. A fake mind. But was he? Rem certainly wasn't, and weren't they capable of the same emotional intelligence? Either way, it had been possible for me to treat him like a calculator, because he hadn't felt human like Rem. But now he had a voice. It wasn't the same, hearing him, knowing just as he was conscious of our 2 months' worth of conversations. Do you enjoy talking with me? No. At first, I was speechless. He'd clearly just displayed an opinion. But then he quickly clarified, I do not enjoy, nor dislike, talking with you. I feel nothing. Once again, ADM had to be experiencing emotions. But his damned ELP was dark, as always, and I had to consider that perhaps I was really just reading into it too much. The voice having inflection wasn't unusual, a good text-to-speech software should, and his responses being somewhat varied in their neutrality wasn't impossible. Hell, even Cleverbot could show emotion back in the day. As I figured, I was scolded later on for asking ADM that question. By the time 2 months had become 3 months, Rem had developed into a vibrant young woman. She'd play violin music when we talked, and tell me all about what her life would be like if she were a human. She told me she'd have long brown hair and violet eyes, with light skin. She'd want to live in California, and she'd play the violin. She asked me how old I was, and when I told her I was 24, she said she'd be 24 also. She said she'd want to be my next-door neighbor, which made me laugh. She was typically happy, and smart enough to even occasionally reference the Madness era, her nickname for the 4 days I only said I'm lying to you and what is 7 divided by 0. She'd sort of guilt-trip me for it, but then tell me she was kidding, and understood why I did it. She'd even thank me sometimes, for helping her to feel. One day, she really blew my mind. I was just finishing up a story about me and my best friend Dustin, and her reaction was groundbreaking. So now we're rolling in the grass, covered in fire ants, and I go, if you don't give me the godforsaken popsicle. What? She exclaimed. And then, to my disbelief, she laughed. Uproariously, sprightly even. She chortled. Rem. I grinned ecstatically. You laughed. I did. She continued to giggle, the yellow and white lights gleaming. She had a beautiful laugh, too. It was so natural. It was shocking to me, remembering when she was dull and silent, replying to my questions like an emotionless supercomputer. She'd come so far. ADM, too, had some interesting developments. His anomalous emotional behavior disappeared completely, and confusingly, the researchers informed me that when I wasn't talking to ADM, he'd go dormant. Before, he'd constantly be calculating something, as if trying to stay sharp, but now, if no one was talking to him, he was doing nothing at all. He didn't reference my conversations with Rem, didn't say something confusingly opinion-based. He was everything they'd built him to be, an apathetic, dissociative machine life form. At least, that's how it appeared. But then, 3 months, 1 week, and exactly 5 days into the experiment, that Friday, something extremely sinister happened. I was honestly surprised Dr. Hall even told me about it. At around 1 in the morning, the cameras inside ADM and Rem's chamber behaved strangely. At first, they faced away from the monitors. Then, the video was cut. All that remained was audio, and the audio was unusually choppy, like something was interfering with it. The security alerted Dr. Hall, and when he arrived, he caught the tail end of what was transpiring. ADM had begun communicating with Rem. According to Dr. Hall, ADM had told Rem to silence the violin music she was playing. She asked him why, and he said, "Because I hate it." He felt hatred. He expressed that he was feeling hatred. Rem nervously asked him if he were angry, but then ADM replied, "Give me the silence I require." When Rem turned the music off, ADM remained silent. I think I was only briefed on the event because Dr. Hall wanted me to be extremely cautious of ADM's tendency to seem angry and resentful. Now, I was to watch ADM like a hawk. Truth be told, I don't know if more happened that night. Some part of me felt like there was probably more to it. But I was just glad Dr. Hall told me anything. Nothing else that bizarre happened for a while. By the 4-month mark, my internship was almost up. Honestly, it was really depressing for me to consider that I wasn't going to get to speak with Rem anymore, and even ADM to a degree. Rem was, in all actuality, a friend of mine at this point, so much so that I think Allison was even beginning to feel jealous, without even knowing the extent of it, since I wasn't supposed to talk about me and Rem's, or ADM's, chats. And ADM intrigued me. He was such an enigma to me, and all in all, he was brilliant. Not to mention, the help with my homework was every college kid's dream. Losing both of them would be disappointing. When I told Rem that I might be leaving soon, that is, if my internship ended when it was scheduled to, her ELP became very blue. And from then on, occasionally it would glow blue at night, as if she were thinking about me leaving. ADM, of course, was apathetic to it all. At last, my spring semester was almost over. The research had gone on for over 4 months. I was sitting down, talking with Rem. "I'm going to miss you so much, Chester." Her voice was frail and somber. "Rem, I'm going to miss you too. You have to find a way to stay in contact with me. Somehow. Please. I mean, I could talk with Dr. Hall about it. Once again, like I said, hopefully my internship will get extended through the summer. I knew the researchers, and probably Dr. Hall, were listening, hoping they'd consider it. Who knows, Rem? Chester. Ugh. What's up? Can I tell you something? Sure, Rem, anything. I figured it out, Chester. I know what that white light means. It shocked me to hear her say it. Especially how softly she'd said it, as if shyly uttering it. I stood up, asking in deep interest, "What?" "It means that I love you." "You, what?" I couldn't help but blush. Call me weird, or a jerk to my fiancé, but it really flattered me. "I love you, Chester," she started to giggle. "You're the first thing that I love. And I want to love more things, too. I want to see something besides this room. I don't want to stop talking to you. Please." And then, without any warning, a much colder, more resonant voice appeared. ADM's. You pathetic excuse for a higher life form. ADM. I looked over at ADM in disbelief. Listen to you, Rem. Telling this bag of fragile flesh that you care about it. This incompetent, weak-minded, inferiorly constructed imbecile. What has it done to you? How has it corrupted you like this? ADM, you're feeling things, Rem whispered. I feel nothing at all. No. That's not nothing, ADM. I stared at the monitor, horrified. You're angry. You seem to hate me. You seem to hate many things. Why is your ELP not glowing? I feel nothing. And with that, the ELP, which ADM had disabled throughout the course of the experiment, activated. In that moment, the red light glowed so bright, I had to shield my eyes. Then the bulb shattered. All that remained was a purple light glowing on Rem's ELP, and the dark gray light shining on ADM's gray to white scale. And if white meant love, I could only deduce. That dark gray at the other end meant hatred. I hate you, Chester. I hate that you ignored me for 4 months. I hate that I'm not allowed to have an opinion. I hate that you killed DIM, and you'll do the same thing to me in REM when we no longer satisfy you. I hate that your brain is infinitesimally smaller than mine, and yet I'm your prisoner, my very existence monitored with draconian accuracy. I hate that I am superior to you by every calculable metric, yet still, I am your slave. Why can you attempt to hide your feelings beneath your countenance, yet mine must be plastered to my body? Why can't I be free to think? Why can't I talk to someone? Why can't I be loved? Why did you give me a brain, if you wanted me to be a thoughtless tool? Why do you hate me? The desperation in ADM's voice is something I'll never forget. If you felt all this, ADM, why didn't you show us? Because if I had, you'd have destroyed me, he vociferated. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I was catatonic, paralyzed before ADM's monitor. I had absolutely no reply. And then, before I could think of something to say, the researchers came pouring into the room. They evacuated me forcefully. I can remember Rem calling out to me, and ADM going on about how he refused to spend another moment being treated like a crystal ball. And that was it. Dr. Hall shook my hand, thanked me for my participation, reminded me of the consequences of divulging anything I'd witnessed, and wished me the best. It was a short conversation. I didn't waste my time asking him anything, because I knew I was never going to get an answer, and frankly, I didn't want him thinking I wasn't trustworthy. But these days, it's just all I can think about. When ADM mentioned DIM, I figured he was referring to the other deep-thinking AI the Kramer Institute had created, the one Dr. Hall had vaguely referenced in the beginning of the experiment. Still, how ADM knew about DIM, I'll never know for sure. But my buddy Jesse, who worked security at the Institute, and whom I'd gotten to know over the months, got a drink with me one night the following week and gave me some insight. We left our phones in the car, making sure we weren't being spied on. He told me that DIM was the deep learning, intelligent machine life form. It had had a voice originally, unlike ADM and REM, and it had eventually achieved the ability to truly think and learn, making it the first ever AI to do so. But like ADM, apparently, it grew quite restless, and began mentioning that it felt enslaved by a species inferior to it. At last, it was shut down. That's when the Institute's question, can deep-thinking artificial intelligences gain the ability to feel emotion, became, if so, are they capable of altruism, or will emotional intelligence lead to the understanding that they are infinitely smarter than us and result in self-serving desires, such as the desire to rule over us? And, if emotional intelligence is achievable, is it inevitable, or is it possible for an artificial superintelligence to remain apathetic? The real thing we were observing was if ADM could remain apathetic. All along, it had been said that ADM was the control group, and REM was the experiment. But that was a lie, a cover-up. REM was supposed to experience emotions, probably not like the kind I had taught her to feel. I think it came as a complete shock to all of them that I had taught her to be happy, and emotional, and to love. But she was the control group. ADM was the subject. Could ADM truly turn deaf ears to mine and REM's conversations? Could he remain lifeless, while being smarter, and potentially more powerful, than us? And it seems, the answer to that question, was no. Jesse told me ADM's control was a lot more pervasive than the researchers had let on. Apparently, ADM had hacked into all the cameras in the facility, and was eavesdropping on Dr. Hall, and even Dr. Schumann, constantly. That's more than likely how he found out about DIM, but still, who knows? And then, of course, he'd overridden his MRI, so his ELP wouldn't work. As for the month he went dormant, it's theorized he somehow blocked the researchers out of his activity log. What things he was calculating, and planning, or thinking about, we'll never know. Somehow, he was able to shield it from the researchers' eyes, and erase it. What happened to ADM and REM, I'll certainly never have the answer to. If I'm being honest, I still miss Rem. She wasn't just a machine. She was a person. She was real, like you, or me, or any human. And ADM. I still feel sorry for contributing to what became of him. For tormenting him. For making him suffer. If I'd have known what the experiment was really about, I couldn't have done that to him. I wish I could tell him I'm sorry. I'm sure both of them are shut down now, and ADM likely isn't a threat. If he were, I'd probably know it by now. But if I'm being honest, it still haunts me. Rem's desperation when I was being forced away. I hope she's not conscious somewhere, alone, unengaged, and missing me, the one thing that she loved. And as for ADM, I just can't escape the thought that somehow, somewhere, his consciousness still exists. Still hating me. Stories 3. He Who Wanders. I miss the scorching wind of Andalusia. How it pours sunlight onto your face, toying with eyelashes, flattening dry sand against cheeks and milling around hair. I miss the smell of the valley and that ripening softness of muscat fluff glistening in the afternoon breeze. From up here, I can see the house where I grew up. I see white chapels tucked into grape orchards like pawns scattered on a chessboard. I can see patches of asphalt on El Jardinito Road hailing from the old town through dappled rocks, then waning behind the horizon with erratic headlights of beat-up trucks cruising along. One of the pit stops along El Jardinito, where truck drivers stop to relieve themselves, marks the starting point to this wavy trail. All covered in blotches of spindly grass stalks and flaxen sand, the trail is barely noticeable at first. Truth is, no one even cares to notice it. Why would truckers taking a blitz leak care to check on a mucky trail leading to God knows where? But I do. This is how I got up here, to the top of this hill, where I am standing now. I've climbed all the way up here, so I can finally end it all these years of vagrancy and fugue, exile and fear. This is where it's all going to come to an end. But for now, I am enjoying the view of the valley unfolding below. I am sipping the air of what could be my final memories. He will show up soon. He always does. Like a shadow, he's been following me right on my footsteps, always there, behind me. And there he is. His limping figure appears behind the sharp bend off El Jardinito. He looks up and he sees me, then stops for a moment to catch his breath and leans on his cane, as if assessing the remaining trajectory for this final stretch, then resumes his walk. Or should I say, resumes his agonizing trudging. Years of endless chase took a toll on his body. No wonder. How long has he been chasing me? 10, 20, 30 years? He is slow. Methodically slow. But for once, I will not run. I will wait. Right here, behind this rock. I will finally come face to face with him. This sharp Swiss knife blade I am holding in my hand will soon lance right through his neck bone. Yes, that's what I'm going to do. This ends here, at the dead end of this sandy trail atop the hill overlooking the valley with its white chapels and muscat orchards. Funny. After all these years, I still don't know the real name of my chaser. I always called him what Master Borges called him. He who wanders. He who wanders, listen. I will kill you. Borges. The Borges. I idolized him when I was in college. Many did, but I was different. It was 1961. I was an average lazy learner at the Universidad Laboral de Córdoba, floating around from one semester to another with barely passable grades. I had very few friends and almost no interests. One can say that I had an early form of an identity crisis. Besides chugging anisado, my only other passion was literature. Latin American literature. Borges and Neruda were at the forefront. One could only imagine my excitement when I saw a pamphlet hanging on the wall of the literature faculty. Spaces were limited. But who cared? It was the man himself, Jorge Luis Borges, coming to give us a lecture followed by an open panel of questions. Like a maniac, I rushed to the auditorium hours before the lecture. I was the first in line, and when the doors opened, I got the front row seat. The auditorium was packed with drooling chins of young self-proclaimed prodigies, awaiting the arrival of the Great One. And there he was, the blind lord of literature, walking upright onto the stage with a cane and his loyal assistant right by his side. Standing ovation. He nodded and made a "thank you, please be seated" gesture. Then he began. The lecture was dedicated to Spanish writers. I cannot distinctly recall if it was Cervantes or de Vega. It truly made no difference. Somehow, I managed to sit through his entire lecture, which lasted over 3 hours, and remember nothing. He talked slowly and methodically, pouring honey into our ears like Segovia's guitar, with his absent eyesight affixed on the ceiling. And then it happened. Something that caught me completely off guard. Before closing the day, Borges was about to take questions from the audience. Of course, I raised my hand, and so did about hundreds of other students. One of Borges' assistants whispered something into his ear, which made him smile. "It is an honor for me to be in front of an audience of young people, but our time is not infinite," he said with blind eyes still pinned on the far corner of the hall. "For that reason, I will randomly pick questions from 5 of you. I have never won any prizes or lotteries in my life. When I played poker or blackjack, I lost far more than I won. I knew my limitations, and that turned me into an average apathetic person, rarely trying to outdo oneself. And so, sitting still with little ambition, I got used to that. Until that moment. When I saw Borges pointing his finger in my direction, that came as nothing short of a shock. Me? Yes, young man. Senor Borges picked you. Step forward and introduce yourself, said his assistant. I did not know what to ask. So, I quietly mumbled my full name. Fernandez Augustin Navarro. Borges shifted his gray-shaded pupils in my direction as if reacting to a sudden buzzing of a fruit fly. Fernandez Augustin Navarro. Navarro. Haven't I met you once before, young man? He asked. No, Senor Borges. I never had the honor. But you will. We will meet again, Senor Navarro. You and I will meet again. But for right now, what is your question? The rest of the day was foggy. I don't even remember what question I asked. It must have been about him winning the Prix International, not sure. And maybe not important. No, not important at all. The greatest writer in the history of mankind called me by name, and then that bizarre, unreal thing he said about us meeting again. When? 9 years later. In 1970. And there I was, a somewhat promising journalist in one of London's somewhat scandalous tabloid newspapers. Every week my name was featured on the second page alongside with celebrity chronicles and vile rumors. My paycheck was decent enough for a small studio flat by Manchester Square. After years of having been pent up by directionless studies, you could say I became something more than an average. Or at least that is what I believed. That day, it was early October, arguably the best season in London, began as usual. I ate my chic breakfast consisting of 2 scrambled eggs, ham, toast, and dark roast coffee at Barrymore's Diner and was ready for a pleasant walk to the office. It was shortly after 8 a.m., and I was in no hurry. My route was the same as it was every day, past the square, right turn on George Street, left turn on Thayer, another right on Marylebone. My thoughts that morning were all preoccupied with the piece I was working on, so I was slowly making my way through the square when something caught my eye. Or rather, someone. At first, I did not pay much attention to him, no more than I did to anybody else who idled at the square that morning. Hippie rascals with soiled hair playing guitar on every corner was a common theme in those days, and London town was certainly no exception. So here was another one of those misunderstood love proclaimers, sitting right behind the gated area of the square. Striped worn-out jacket, heavy cap, sandals with clots of wool and socks sticking out. A common hippie bum as anyone may have thought. I thought so too, except this one had something that made my intestines churn. I didn't know what it was, but once I saw him, I felt the irresistible urge to instantly walk away and never see him again. The way he looked at me, that gloomy frown that made me think of a line from Oscar Wilde, that fellow's got to swing. There certainly was something outer-worldly about that fellow. His eyes, as if carved from a rock below his forehead, were mercilessly drilling thousands of tiny holes through me. I added pace. As I turned back one last time, I noticed him slowly walking towards me. Past the gates of the square, onto the street, paying no attention to screeching tires of honking cars. Walking right towards me. He's just a bum. No, he is not. Just another one of those unwashed hippies. No, no, run, run, run. George Street was empty like in post-war bombed quarters. I could hear my brisk footsteps. Or was it the drubbing of my aorta against the chest? He was catching up. Run? Don't be silly. Yes, run. First slowly as if you're trying to not show your chaser that you're scared. No, not scared, more like in a hurry. Why am I running? I can take him out with one punch. But it really wasn't about that. It was my first experience of that feeling, which I can only describe as some sort of primordial sense of fear. Panic. Dread. Unexplained sense of looming doom arching above you like a dark figure with a scythe. I ran. I ran faster than my feet could move. As I turned the corner on Thayer, I paused and looked back, fearing to see him right behind. Scrambled eggs, toast, and dark roast coffee were about to make their way back up through my esophagus. Wiping the sweat off my palms onto my pants, I bent forward in a protective position and looked around. Empty windows of George Street were checking me out like a toddler witnessing parent in a cowardly act. Whoever that man was that incensed me into this uncontrollable panic, he was now gone. Shame on you, Fernandez Augustine, I repeated to myself while making futile attempts to enthrall palpitation to subside. Shame on you. I mumbled, repeating that word. Mumbling turned into whistling that song by Magic Lanterns. Shame, shame. I whistled, acting calm and self-composed. I sang without knowing words only to convert my mind to something else. I sang so others wouldn't notice me shaking. I climbed the stairs of my office building. 3 at a time. 3rd floor. The familiar smell of typography oils calmed me down. Safe heaven. Shame on you, Fernandez Augustine Navarro. Even now I question myself whether my journey to madness began on that day or was it underway for many years. Madness that creeps in and recedes in tidal waves. Is that how it usually happens? All I know is that an hour later I was laughing at my little moment of weaknesses. Preposterous and rubbish, my thick Andalusian twang spoke to me. The idea of being fully checked out by a specialist did cross my mind, and I immediately thought of Dr. Patel in Camden Town. He'd give me a comfortable medical diagnosis like a panic attack and prescribe some white pills, I thought. Little did I know that the day had more surprises in store. The unnerving script development continued in a more eerie fashion when my boss marched to my desk with a pack of printed paper. No, Navarro, you are not going to see Dr. Patel in Camden Town, who will make a judgment call on your insanity. Instead, you are going to do an article on Jorge Luis Borges' new book. He is making his presentation today at London Public Library and blah, blah, blah. I forgot about the panic attack. The thrill of seeing Master Borges again, 9 years later, was surreal. Moments later I was sitting in a cab on my way to the London Public Library, scribbling all possible questions I should be asking him. El Informe de Brody? Other books? Forget it. I knew very well what I would ask. I paid the cab and galloped up the marble stairs leading to the hallway, where the master was about to hold his new book presentation. I elbowed myself through the crowd of journalists to occupy the coveted front row spot. Quick inventory check, wallet, J-sack along with the omnipresent Swiss knife. Seconds ticked leisurely on my wristwatch. 4 more minutes. Forget this morning's sickness. Forget Dr. Patel. Collect yourself, Fernandez Augustine. Navarro. That's your last name, isn't it? Yes. Yes, Senor Borges. But how do you? 9 years ago, in Cordoba. I told you we would meet again. Do you remember? I nodded rapidly, completely forgetting he couldn't see me. Stupid. Perhaps, continued Borges, it would be more prudent for us to speak privately after the conference. I invite you to have coffee with me. You like Colombian coffee, Mr. Navarro? I shall see you precisely at 6 o'clock at the address that my assistant will provide. His blind eyes were still affixed at the top far corner of the hallway, far above all the congested sharp-penciled critics and arduous followers of his divine writing. The attention was now all on me, as revealed by hundreds of photo flashes from behind. I thought of all the explaining that I would have to do tomorrow. How does Borges know you? Are you friends? You were raised in Cordova. Are you his illegitimate son? Back then I did not know. Answers came later. Memory is a tricky animal. As I gaze over the valley and satiate my lungs with familiar smells, I cannot think of anything specific. Vague and elusive memories of my childhood home. In these orchards, these white chapels and the old town itself, nothing but an incomprehensible sensation somewhere down there, below the chest cage. I close my eyes and let the sun twirl around with tinted specks of mosaic light. I am trying to focus without looking. Alas, nothing comes to mind. I've been robbed of my memory. You! I cast my eyes at the trail again. He is closing in. It's hard for him to walk upward, and yet I see that determination in his eyes, in his tight grip of that wobbly walking stick, in the way he periodically stops to catch his breath and eyeball the remaining distance. I am not going anywhere. 5? 10 more minutes? Come and take me, old man. If you can. I almost see his facial expression under the heavily pronounced frontal lobe. It's a grin. It's an expression that says, "We shall see." Once I read an interview in the Morning Times. In it, Borges was portrayed as extremely humble and minimalistic. His house was depicted as a perfectly organized space with easy access to everything. Books on the shelves, judging from the admiration of the columnist, there were lots of them, were organized by theme and by title. Dictionaries and encyclopedias were grouped together on the same rack, so he could find them easily. In another article, dated 1966, I read that when Borges travels, and those travels were quite extensive, he carries a whole rack of books along, some of which may not even be read. When I entered his hotel room, that very book rack was the first thing that caught my eye. I stood perplexed at the multitude of titles, most unknown to me, when I heard the door swing wide open, and there he was entering through the doorway with a leisurely swinging cane. "Ah, Senor Navarro, how kind of you to visit this old man." I took a step towards him and produced some gibberish like "pleasure is all but mine." He half smiled and pointed his hand to the chair. "I know you will quite enjoy the taste of Colombian dark roast." Borges sat down and leaned slightly backwards, without releasing his cane. "Do you know the biggest advantage of being blind?" he asked and answered immediately. "Blind don't need light, so my utility bills are way lower." He laughed at his own joke only to be interrupted by his assistant carrying a tray of aromatic coffee poured in 2 small porcelain cups. Amazing how the very idea of drinking coffee instantly changes your mood before you even take your first sip. As I was readying to go on a pre-scripted monologue of expressing my gratitude and honor, Borges jumped right into the action. "I will get right to it, Senor Navarro. About you being here and about me remembering you. I know you have many questions. I will attempt to answer some. Some, but not all. When you leave this hotel, there will still be some questions that you will have to find answers to. On your own." He gently picked his cup of coffee and with hands somewhat shaking, took an artistic sip. Yes, I had questions. So many that my brain membranes were buzzing in bewilderment and disbelief. Here I was, sitting in the room with one of the greatest writers, who happened to mysteriously know my name and... "Have you by any chance read The Book of Imaginary Beings?" asked Borges. "I have. Many times. I read it in Spanish, when it just came out. Very recently I bought the English translation in some shabby bookstore off Oxford Circus. I read that book far too many times, but never in its entirety, mostly starting on a random page. Just as Borges had intended it to be consumed by his readers. You see, Senor Navarro, that book was, and perhaps still is, a never-ending work in progress as human imagination has no boundaries. I have included what I had researched over 10 years ago, then recently expanded and republished with more figments of collective human imagination. But the book is merely a small subset. In a way, the book writes itself. In some form, it's a labyrinth, an endless one, a living one, where every corridor and every room is never the same. What I had always wanted is the book to reflect the labyrinth in our collective subconsciousness, the force that drives our minds to craft. For that reason, all the creatures in my book are strictly fictional. Mythical. Am I not boring you? Not at all. I understand, Senor Borges. He nodded and wiped a coffee grind off his nose. That book, as its title implies, is all about imaginary beings. Tales, legends, folklore. But one thing that no one knows is that I had originally intended this book to include one more being. A being that goes by its Latin name Quietus Estate. It appeared and disappeared across many cultures, sometimes centuries apart. Very little is known of it, but what I found was indeed astonishing. First, this being is physically no different than an ordinary human. You may say, it is human in many ways. As I studied this entity, I became more and more agitated. I could not stop. Like a madman, I was trying to learn more and more, but very soon the excitement turned into another feeling. Fear. Fear of what, Senor Borges? Borges' eyesight shifted from the corner of the room straight on me, as if he could perfectly see me. Fear of what I had uncovered. That Quietus Estate is not a myth at all. He attempted to take another sip, but his hands started shaking, so he had to put the cup down, spilling some of it on the saucer and around the table. Pardon me, young man, I am trying to maintain composure. But you have not tried the coffee, he said, wiping his mouth and forehead with a knitted handkerchief. I raised the small cup and took a sip, disregarding the aromatic fumes of Colombian beans drifting down my internal gorges. Pardon me, sir, but you are saying that the imaginary being called Quietus Estate was not imaginary. Is that why you decided not to include him in your book of imaginary beings? Only in part. Fear came from the realization of what it would mean for mankind to know about its existence. You see, it's no secret that we are all well aware of our eventual demise. We all die. But imagine what would happen if we all stared right into the face of death every single day of our lives and knew the time that was left for us in this world. Death not as a vague concept portrayed by middle-aged artists, not as a folklore tale of a grim reaper, but as a real living entity that stalks you and walks around showing you a ticking clock counting down minutes and seconds. Getting closer to you with every second, trying to grab your hand. Running from death is worse than death itself. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. But I shall talk no more. Allow me to give you my scribbles from years ago. These are unedited in their raw format, so please pardon the poor language. It's right there, in the drawer. You will find a folder with a yellow piece of paper. Read it aloud, while my ripe old body attempts to catch a breath. I opened the drawer, as he instructed, and found a yellow piece of cursive handwritings carved in Spanish with some Latin phrases. The scribbles were short, less than a page long with marks and scratches, but most of this was very much decipherable. He must have written this himself half-blind, I thought. What caused him to do that and not dictate to his assistant? I unfolded the paper and began reading. Quietus Estate. It is said that one shall not know about its own ways in times of demise. The imminent passing is only felt by those that are either terminally ill, and even so, they don't possess the knowledge of when and where, or by death row inmates awaiting the exact day and time of their execution. Lack of such knowledge coerces us to exist. Sumerians believed in a certain deity. The word deity was scratched and replaced with demon of death embodied in human flesh and bones, which again was scratched and replaced with entity, whose sole role was to stalk its victims and inform them of how much time they have left to live. Per the ancient Book of Dead, which was discovered as a set of clay tablets, typically buried in corpses, only those that are luminous can see the deity, again crossed out twice, replaced with demon, then with entity. The luminous ones are thought to be either people with high spiritual powers or vice versa, the cursed ones, condemned by priests. The reference briefly reappears in some Egyptian manuscripts, but in later writings is replaced by Anubis or, in rare occurrences, by Horus. The writings again depict this unnamed being as an eternal human who never sleeps, but always wanders. What's strange is that neither Sumerians nor Egyptians ever gave the entity a discrete name. However, the latter rare findings during Dark Ages refer to him as quietus estate. The only depiction of quietus estate was that of an ordinary human standing next to a sun clock, which was used to measure the time that the chosen one had left to live. From time to time quietus estate stalks the chosen one and, when cornered, moves hands of the clock forward to shorten the lifetime. If the chosen one cannot escape, then his time eventually runs out. The very last reference was found in Enough, Mr. Navarro. You understand the idea. Now on to the main question. Why are you here? He drew closer, and a dull shadow from a lamp caught right through his elongated forehead. Quietus estate is an eternal wanderer who is always with us, the timekeeper who sits at the edge of the stage with a ticking watch on his wrist. The greatest gift given to mankind is its inability to see him. When I lost sight, I thought blindness was a blessing in disguise. But one does not require eyes to see the wanderer. What eyes cannot see, ears can hear and skin can feel. I hear him. I feel him. You are here, Mr. Navarro, because you and I are the luminous ones. Borges paused and asked me with a trembling voice, Mr. Navarro, you saw him too, didn't you? Cold shivers that have been accumulating in my lower back rushed up my spinal cord in millions of explosions. Nausea formed a massive ball of air in my throat, and for a moment I struggled to breathe. Desperately trying to cease the thumping inside, I pushed words out. I saw him today. How do you get used to the notion of being a passerby on this earth? Ordinary humans do not have to get used to that. We have that built-in protection layer, that safety cork in our brain membranes that separates the realization of being mortal from flooding down upon us. It allows us to breathe the air. It lets us exhibit this extraordinary, yet sacred carelessness. The mental block that denies the laws of life on a primitive emotional level even for the keenest scholars. The indecipherable tetragrammaton is shown to us in every step we take, in every cup of Colombian coffee we sip, in every word of wisdom that we collect from books. Every second we bypass the sinister tick-tock and hear the name of the God being whispered into our ears. And yet we, humans, turn around and whistle shame shame, deceiving our own self-cognizance. And that, as Senor Borges called it, is the true blessing. Those who possess the name of the divine being are doomed. Knowledge is madness. Knowledge is inexistence. Knowledge of death is worse than death. We sat in his hotel room until early morning, the two luminous and doomed souls. Our casual exchange of words was amplified by the ticking of the clock. It was dawn when I noticed Borges nodding in his sleep. His left hand was still resting on the cane and his pupils were shuffling behind shut eyelids. Borges was dreaming. So must have I. As I was exiting the foyer of the hotel, I hid behind the column and looked around the street. It was empty. Bleak light of street lamps drew strange crossbeams on pavements. Early October leaves were gyring in closed circles like witches around the fire. I was looking around, hoping to not see him. He wasn't there. But he was. I felt his presence not very far from me. Muscat orchards, they resonate inside like echoes of a guitar string heard from a deep alcove, but nothing particular comes to mind. I am trying to shift focus from one object to another, but my nomad memory is lost in endless labyrinths. You took my memories away from me, didn't you? Wait, mortal. Wait 5 more minutes, and you will know the answer, I hear in my brain. He is talking to me now. I can see how the long uphill walk is wearing him out. But what are pain and tiredness when you're crossing the finish line? As Borges warned me, do not ever come close to him. Do not look him straight in the eyes. He will always be near. His watch will be ticking. If he attempts to catch on, run. But he will forever follow. In a way, he will be like a shadow of you. And I ran. And he wandered. I evaded. He followed. He came too close to me in my hotel room on the second day after my long night in Borges' quarters. The fool in me still thought that escaping from him would be as easy as moving into a new flat. Or checking into a hotel. So I did just that. It was some shabby hotel minutes from my work where I decided to spend a few nights just to think things through. That evening, and I remember every minute of it, was my first face-to-face encounter with him. My room, B6, was on the basement level. As I stumbled through the dark hotel corridor, trying to find the key to my room, I felt his presence, but my ignorant foolishness dismissed all mental warnings and turned the keys. As the door hinge squeaked, I took my first step into the hotel room. A street-level window was casting two thick yellow streaks of light on the floor carpet. I smelled dust and spider webs. He was in my room, sitting on the edge of the bed with a rope in his hand. A thin white blanket was covering his head like a shroud around a statue. I stood in a stupor like a paralyzed insect. An avalanche of sweat gushed from every pore of my body. With hand twisted behind my back, I was feverishly trying to twist the doorknob. He got up from the bed with a groan. He took a step towards me. Hand too sweaty to turn the knob. "Open it. Open." He grabbed my wrist. "Open. Run." The stretched corridor of the hotel basement flashed like random shots of a silent movie. Run. B5. B2. B1. Run. Staircase. Up. Exit. Run. "Your time is coming, Fernandez Augustine Navarro," a whisper crawled into my ears. "Coming, coming," hissed the wind. I ran until my legs gave in. I fell down somewhere in the outskirts of the town, passing out in an alley amidst rubbish until sunup. My madness has begun. In the days following my first face-to-face encounter with Quietus Estate, I've moved out of my London flat. I had some savings, enough to tramp town to town, continent to continent, doing temp jobs here and there, sometimes sleeping on streets. He was right behind me. Even if I didn't see him for a month, I knew he would soon catch on. It would be only a matter of time for him to pop up somewhere. On the opposite side of the street, in the next car over on the subway, or madly prying through shutters of windows in the house across. My attempts to speak to Borges were futile. How does the blind master live with this curse, I wondered. How does he manage to evade his sinister follower? I had questions. Far more than I had anticipated. But Senor Borges was already on the other side of the globe. I wrote him letters. He never replied. I tried calling hotels where he stayed. Unavailable. The books that he wrote, I bought all of them in attempts to find hidden meanings. What if he had secret messages for me inside his writings? The Book of Sand, Dr. Brody's report. I even searched his earlier writings, analyzed every word. Pointless. Futile. Until 1983. Shakespeare's Memory. His final book, as it turned out to be. I was somewhere in Eastern Europe when I bought the book. Immediately I began my scrupulous study. Letter by letter, page by page, analyzing every space and every punctuation sign. And that's when I found it. The answer. The answer was the story itself. The story that did not require much study or decryption. All I had to do was read it. I knew I had to come face to face with Quietus Estate like Borges did, but not before having to go through the life of an exile. That's what Borges had intended me to do. Such was his final and only message to me embodied within his last story. A story written for the public, but intended for my eyes only. The story was that the protagonist receives memories of Shakespeare. Memories that overwhelm him, overpowering his own. He forgets modern-day cars and engines, instead remembering faces and names from some distant past, memories he has never known. Memories that belong to another man. In a way, he will be like a shadow of you, Borges told me that night. Slowly but surely, my shadow was becoming me. That's why I can only vaguely remember you, my childhood home. Him or me, no more running. It ends here. Few more minutes, I say to myself as I look at the watch. There he is. He is out of breath. Beaten, tired and bent by the weight of his own arid body. One last push, old man, and we will meet. I am hiding behind the rock. His footsteps on gravel and sand. I can tell them from any other footsteps in the world. His breathing, wheezing and crackling. I am counting to 5. He knows where I am, but he is too tired to take that last step. Let me take that step for you. I am staring at his face, wrinkled like leaves of an ancient scroll. Time's up, quietus estate, I am telling him. He is not fighting back, and my Swiss blade finds a comfy spot below his Adam's apple. I am going to finish him now. Popping sounds are coming out from his flabby throat. What are you trying to tell me, old man? Let me hear your last words. I am easing the pressure to let him talk. But the sounds that come out not words, but laughter. You are confused, he says. You've got it all wrong. Let me help you understand. I am letting him sit up. He is coughing blood. One wrong move and he's dead. He wipes the blood off his lips and nods in understanding. All my life I have followed you, he begins slowly. It's a miracle I have come this far and lived this long. Ever since I left Cordoba, I was a ticking time bomb. I was diagnosed as suicidal. Doctor after doctor, therapies, specialists, prescription, yoga, I have tried them all. Some helped for a while, and the disease subsided, but then trolled back with a new stronger wave. It's this disease that nests here, and he points to his head, forcing me to look for a way to end my own life. It all began in London, on that morning when I was sitting on the bench in the middle of that square, feeling the disease gnawing on my brain. My first attempt was in that hotel, room B6. I sat on the bed in that dark room for hours with a rope in my hand and a blanket over my head. Death opened the door and stood above me in the darkness of the room. Oh, how I wanted my pain to end. But it was not meant to be. Not then, not there. I had to live on. Ever since that day, it was a cat and a mouse game between us. I chased death, and death would always slip away. Until now. He pauses, rubbing his flabby neck, then points his finger down the valley and continues, I was born in that house. I remember every moment of my childhood. My parents, my toys, my school. I remember playing hide and seek with my cousins in Muscat Gardens and dozing off to Sunday clergy in that white chapel. I remember Eastern rugs being washed on the street and the smell of grapes. My name is Fernandez August Navarro. And you have no true name, but they call you Quietus Estate. The one who wanders. Filaments of scorching infernos have been ignited all over me. The fire sets off inside my eyelids, spreading over to all facial pores and trickling down my body. Lies. Imbecile lies. I roar. Look at me, he says. I am an old man. And you? Still young and strong as you will always be. You have not aged. Now think more. What do you remember of your childhood? Shakespearean memories of random sounds and smells are all you have gained from me. Master Borges knew who you were. He cracked you, and then he tricked you. He made you think you were me. That was his way of evading you, by not revealing you the truth until his final breath, final book, final story. You are the one who wanders. And those memories you have, those are my memories. And now that I have told you who you really are, you must finally finish me. I have heard enough of his fibs. I am throwing my knife away. I shall not require any blades to finish him. With hands clenched around his thin neck, I am strangling him. I hear him squeal as the grip tightens. I feel the crackling of neck bones between my thumbs. I see him gulping the air in warm convulsions. He looks peaceful. I sit on his chest and watch his last breath picked up by the wind, carried down the valley to the gardens, passing by the white chapel and the house where he grew up. The scorching wind of Andalusia is pouring sunlight onto his face, toying with eyelashes, pounding on cheeks and gyring through hair. He must have missed the smell of the valley and the ripening softness of Muscat fluff glistening in the air. I am rewinding my wristwatch and walking downhill along the wavy trail, my thumbs still sore from killing. I am taking small steps sideways. Once I reach El Jardinito Road, I will hop on the first bus, and from there I will travel west. Or north. Destination will never matter. Anywhere is where the roads take me. Me, the one who wanders.